If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as follow me and subscribe to me on all my other social media platforms. What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and we have finally made it, ladies and gentlemen. We have made it to the end of the year, and holy shit, what a year it was for metal music as a whole, because so many killer releases across the board, across almost every subgenre out there, was able to deliver, and then some. Hell, I would say this year was maybe a notch better than last year, and last year I reviewed a shit ton of shit. This year I think I may have doubled the amount of shit that I reviewed. I don't know. It was a lot. There was a lot to take in this year, and, well, before I get started with the lists and all that good stuff, I just want to say thank you guys who have watched my reviews this year and letting me know your thoughts, even if I disagreed with some people on their opinions on certain albums. But hey, that's the beautiful thing about music. But there seemed to be a couple of big trends that happened this year. Like, this year was kind of the year for old school death metal, but also prog death, like progressive death metal bands, or at least death metal bands that explored more progressive territory. So those were kind of two big trends that I noticed. And then even a third trend, bands exploring their classic heavy metal roots, whether it be in death metal, black metal, doom metal, what have you. There was a lot of that going on this year as well. And also this year, you could say, in terms of like what was the genre that really reigned supreme, it was death metal, largely because not only some upcoming bands releasing killer stuff, but some of the classic bands delivered some killer material this year to show that, hey, just because we got some new good kids on the block don't mean that the old guys can't do it as well. But with all that said, let's get started with some honorable mentions. So I am doing a top 40 list, but I'm not going to do them in parts. You're going to get it in one video. So let's get a drink. And you guys who are watching, grab a snack, and let's have some fun. So we're going to kick off the honorable mentions portion of this list. So I'm just going to go through them quickly. We have ADATA with Crepuscule Natra, Incantation Unholy Deification, Panopticon The Rime of Memory, Cryptopsy as Gamora Burns, Nervosa Jailbreak, Crypta Shades of Sorrow, Ahab's Decoral Tombs, Lumen Ad Mortem Upon the Edge of Darkness, Metallica 72 Seasons, and Overkill Scourged. All these albums were good to outstanding, but just barely missed the cut on the list for me. Yes, I'm not going to be biased and put 72 Seasons in the list, because while it is pretty good, I don't really go back to it very often compared to some other albums that came out this year that I liked a lot more. But with all that said, with those honorable mentions out of the way, let's get into the actual list. Starting at number 40, we have Church of Misery with Born Under a Bad Sign. This was one I listened to later. In fact, I just talked about this yesterday on my latest Under the Radar episode, and yeah, I was pleasantly surprised at how riffy this album got. Japanese stoner doom, and it's catchy and all about serial killers. What more could you want from this band? Like, as far as I know, this is what they sing about pretty much all the time. But holy shit, these riffs are old school as hell. The Black Sabbath, Sleep, Cathedral, Electric Wizard. You name any stoner doom band, it's in there. So that's my number 40. Number 39, we have Primordial with How It Ends. So this was only the second Primordial album I've ever listened to, the other one being To the Name Was Dead. So I was eagerly curious about this one. And this album, I will say, not really a whole lot of black metal going on here. Like, very few black metal moments. This is really mostly like classic metal with a lot of that Irish Celtic folk influence going on, because there was a lot of classic metal flair going on this album. And kind of similar to another album I'm going to talk about later in the list. But yeah, Primordial, How It Ends, at my number 39. Number 38, we have Angar with The Profound Recreant. So this was a band I discovered earlier in the year, and I saw these guys are a death metal band from South Dakota that were compared to the classic Swedish death metal bands like Bloodbath, Dismember, Entombed. And holy shit, this is some of the best HM2 death metal I heard this year, but they add in some symphonic elements and some black metal to it. So while these guys, you could call them the Bloodbath of the Great Plains of America, they definitely like to throw in their own wrinkles into the threads, essentially, like with these symphonic elements and these black metal tremolos that come in here and there, but it still remains brutal and heavy. Also, getting guest stars like Steve Tucker on here was a pretty big bonus for the album for me. But yeah, number 38, Angar. Number 37, we have Ulthar with Anthronomicon and Helionomicon. Yeah, I know I'm putting two albums in one list, or two albums on the same spot, but they're essentially a double album, so I'm just going to count them as one and just say screw it. But yeah, this was another one I talked about yesterday on the Under the Radar episode for albums that I missed, and holy shit, this album, it's riffy, but yet it's very dark and sinister, yet it still maintains death metal brutality, even though it's more blackened death metal. But then on Helionomicon, you get those more progressive influences, especially considering they're two 20-minute tracks. So yeah, this is definitely a band I need to get into the older stuff and see what they'll have in store in the future. But yeah, both of these albums, evil, heavy, dark, proggy, awesome shit. Number 36, we have Catatonia with Sky Void of Stars. This was one that came out early in the year, back in January, and while I haven't gone back to it a whole lot, I can admit this is some awesome, catchy stuff. Like, this is definitely more on the lines of prog rock, alternative metal, that kind of fusion, but with a bit of gothic to it. But man, Jonas and Anders just know how to come up with some catchy riffs and catchy parts. And I'm shocked this band isn't bigger in terms of mainstream, because these guys know how to write mainstream style hooks but still retain what Catatonia has always been about. And this album is certainly proof of that, and it is my number 6. Or not number 6, number 36. I'm jumping the gun here. I need another drink. So yeah, Catatonia at 36. Number 35, we have Tesseract with War of Beings. So this is kind of controversial only because, like I've said many times before, gent is not a genre, it's a guitar tone. Even though it's present on here, they don't abuse it like Meshuggah or Periphery or any other band that you would classify as gent, even though it's not a genre, people. Anyways, but yeah, progressive metal done very well. And I was hesitant about checking this out because I know it's like Daniel Tompkins' vocals are pretty high register. Even though they are high registered, they don't sound forced like a certain Spencer Sotelo, wink. He actually showcases great vocal range from low notes to high notes, and even has a nice growl to him. And these songs can range from being very brutal to very beautiful. And that, in my opinion, is a perfect recipe for a great prog metal album. So yeah, number 35. Number 34, we have Void Ceremony with Threads of Unknowing. This is another proggy one, although this is progressive blackened death metal, so kind of like Ulthar, only I would say this is more unhinged and deranged than Ulthar is. Like, this album is just absolute chaos in the best way possible, all about cosmic evil and just absolutely trying to scare the living shit out of you, but at the same time kind of draw you in through melody and that progressive influence, and just excellent songwriting across the board on this entire album. Definitely need to listen to it a lot more, but it's definitely on the list because I remember I talked about it either in a full review or in an Under the Radar episode, and I was just like, wait, what? But yeah, number 34. Now I can finally flip the page over. So now, number 33, we have Cattle Decapitation Terracite. I know some people would have expected me to have this a lot higher, but there was just so much competition this year. But this is still a fantastic follow-up to my personal favorite Cattle Decap album, Death Atlas. This album definitely explores, I would say, more black metal terrain. Like, there's a lot of, like, dark funeral vibes I get on here, but they still retain who they are at their core, that proggy death grind sound. Of course, Travis Ryan's vocals on this album are just absolutely insane, especially on songs like Aphotic Doom and Just Another Body. Like, those songs, and even This World Will Go On Without You, Scourge of the Offspring, like, top to bottom, excellent album. It just doesn't quite hold up in comparison to Death Atlas, for me at least, but it's still a worthy follow-up, and I can't wait to hear what's coming next. Number 32, we have Alkaloid with Newman. So this was one that came out later, back in September, I believe. And I was always one to check this band out because you have former and current members of Obscura in there, like Christian Munzner and Hannes Grossman in particular. But progressive death metal done very well, with some increments of tech death in there to kind of give you that old school Obscura and Necrophagist vibe. But this album gets very proggy, and it's a double album. It's a double disc, but man, they know how to take you on a journey through technicality and melody, and at times brutality, all across this entire double disc journey. And this is definitely one I need to get in the collection at some point, as well as another album, because I only have one from Alkaloid, and I forget the name of the other one besides Newman that I don't have. But yeah, Alkaloid at 32. Number 31, Blackb Braid with Blackb Braid 2. Another one some people are going to be shocked I have this low, but again, the competition this year was just difficult to hammer down. But yeah, this was another one I talked about yesterday on Under the Radar, and holy shit, I should have checked this album out when it came out, because this is definitely among the best black metal albums I've heard in a while. I mean, lots of classic metal flair going on here, and even finishing off with an awesome cover of Bathory's A Fine Day to Die. What more could you ask for from this album that hasn't been asked for already, other than just delivering riffs, great melodies, and classic heavy metal influence on a couple of tracks? So yeah, Blackb Braid at 31. Number 30, we have Creeping Death with Boundless Domain. So this is my first time checking out Creeping Death, and holy shit, I could definitely see these guys getting a lot bigger in terms of the death metal scene, because, wow, these songs just pack an absolute punch. Like, having a little bit of a hardcore vibe on top of the death metal, but still able to deliver blazing speed, brutality, yet filled with some catchy riffs. So Texas boys that are absolutely killer. I know some people are probably going to be shocked that I don't have Frozen Soul on the list. That was close to being an honorable mention. It is good, but I feel it lacked a little bit compared to Crypt of Ice. Whereas Creeping Death, I feel like when it came down to the Texas death metal sound, this album was the king of that scene this year for me. And that's why Creeping Death is my number 30. Number 29, we have Outer Heaven with Infinite Psychic Depths. This was an absolute chaotic album, I should say. I had already checked these guys out with their debut album back in 2018, I want to say. So when I saw they had something new coming out, I was eagerly awaiting it. And this album, whole lot different than Realms of Eternal Decay, I believe that was the name of the debut, if I remember. Whereas that was like more hardcore and death doom oriented. This is definitely more old school death metal. Not so much of the hardcore on here. Like, there's lots of Morbid Angel nods all over this album, and holy shit, one of the more brutal albums of 2023, for me at least. And it is my number 29. Number 28, actually these next few are going to be all very similar. Number 28, we have Spirit Adrift with Ghost at the Gallows. Of course, this band, they just continue to pump out awesome release after awesome release. Yeah, definitely starting out more of that doom metal side. Now they're more of a classic heavy metal band, and this is modern classic heavy metal done very well with that lots of Judas Priest and Iron Maiden nods, but still retaining that Black Sabbath doom influence on this album, even though it does gallop more than it does slow down. But this was awesome stuff, like fucking... I always forget the name of the... From it, Nate Garrett. He knows how to write riffs and great vocal hooks. And this album is certainly no... Like, there's no BSing on here, I guess I should say. I'm kind of stumbling my words because it's still morning when I'm recording this, so I'm still a little bit in the head. But still, Spirit Adrift, number 28. Number 27, we have Bottomless with The Banishing. This was one of those oddball choices on the list because this was a band I had never heard of. Ow, as I just kicked my table. But when I heard this and listened to it and reviewed it for Under the Radar, I was like, man, this is some really cool stuff. That balance of classic doom and classic metal together. Like, it's doomy, but still classic heavy metal oriented. Almost like a hodgepodge of, like, Black Sabbath from the 70s, Witchfinder General, Pagan Altar, and perhaps even a little bit of St. Vitus. Like, all mashed together into this one album, and it sounds like it was recorded back in, like, the late 70s, early 80s, which adds to the charm of this album. Check it out if you haven't. It is my number 27. Coming in at number 26, we have probably the biggest surprise for me this year, Raven with All Hell's Breaking Loose. Yes, the classic Nawabum legends come out of nowhere with an awesome album with an excellent production to it, and also with Mike Heller, formerly of Fear Factory and also in Malignancy, on drums, and blast beats on a classic metal album, which is something I didn't think you could pull off, but they pulled it off very well. And it's like Mike's pushing the Gallagher brothers to just really go for it, and they sure did. Great riffs, great solos, bass lines, vocals, just everything. Like, this, in terms of, like, classic old school heavy metal, this was probably the best thing to come out this year for that, and it is my number 26. Alright, we're almost through with the list. We're almost halfway through. Up next at number 25, we got the earliest album to come out that's on my list. Obituary with Dying of Everything. This was, I think, the first review I did this year. And holy shit, it stayed on the list because it's still, I think, one of the best things Obituary has done. Like, I would even put this on par with the self-titled that came out 6 years ago. This, it just delivers more groove, but yet they still bring in the speed. But that song, Be Warned, that closing track, probably the doomiest song Obituary has ever done, and holy shit, it was incredible. Top to bottom, not a wasted moment, one of the best of the year, and one of the best in her career, my 25. Coming in at 24, we have Cruachan with The Living and the Dead. This is another one of those surprise releases, because Cruachan has always been a band I've seen the name pop up, but never checked out anything until this new album. Wow. Celtic metal done perfectly. Like, you get those Celtic folky melodies, but with little hints of black metal, and even one track even having like a Morbid Angel moment. But I would say top to bottom, this is mostly like classic heavy metal with that Celtic folk vibe, with touches of extreme metal at times. But yeah, you can definitely tell Cruachan love their Iron Maiden and Thin Lizzy when it comes down to these triplet swings and gallops they go for. But man, catchiness all over it. Absolutely catchy. And if you are a fan of classic heavy metal, but you also like that Celtic folk vibe, check this out. And you might be surprised to hear some black metal and death metal parts at times. And it is my 24. Number 23, we have Cannibal Corpse with Chaos Horrific. This is another one I bet a lot of people are going to be shocked I don't have higher. It's a great album. It's what you expect out of a Cannibal Corpse album, but it doesn't quite measure up to Violence Unimagined, at least in my opinion. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's still fantastic. Again, what more could you want from Cannibal Corpse, as these songs get thrashy, but you still have groove. I mean, Bloodblind, one of the best death metal songs of the year, Summon for Sacrifice. Just, mwah. Cannibal Corpse just continue to be consistent, and I look forward to what we got next, especially with Eric Rutan still in the band. And Eric definitely shined on this album when it came to not only the riffs, but the guitar solos. And it is my number 23. Number 22, we have Rise to the Sky with 2 Years of Grief. Definitely probably the saddest, or at least one of the saddest albums to come out this year in terms of the atmosphere and the feeling. But yeah, Sergio, he just continues to push himself creatively, and this was the end of like a big storyline arc across a few of the recent Rise to the Sky albums, all about loss and death and grief. But this, definitely, while still a Death Doom album, you get blast beats and even like some black metal parts kind of peppered in here and there on this album, which I think adds to how great this album was. Granted, I haven't gone back to it as much, but I still can't forget the first time I heard it, and I was just like, man, this is sad, but yet it's angry. And it is my number 22. Number 21, we have Vomitor with All Heads Are Gonna Roll. This was one I was awaiting because I was curious to hear what Vomitor had in store for us in 2023. And holy shit, like that hybrid of like Bloodbath and Cannibal Corpse and like even Vader and Monstrosity, it's fast, it's furious, you get your triplet chugs, but yet you get little bits of melody in here every once in a while at least. But just holy shit, Vomitor just come out of nowhere and just delivers a fucking brutal death punch. Not the 5-finger kind, that sucks, but the brutal death punch to your face to say, hey, but motherfuckers, we're back and we're gonna kick your ass. So yeah, number 21. Alright, we're halfway through the list, so we got 20 down, 20 to go. Coming in at number 20, we have Ascended Dead with Even Fall of the Apocalypse. So this was the one album on this list I did not do a full review on, but I did like write a mini review on the community tab on my YouTube page. This is some absolutely raw and chaotic old school death metal. Very much in the vein of Morbid Angel, Immolation. I'll even throw in Slayer for the thrashy side. Even little bits of old school, like early death, I would say, kind of pops up in here. And the vocals sound straight up like a even more dry and brutalizing Martin Van Drunen. This almost sounds like what would happen if Martin Van Drunen did vocals on Altars of Madness to some extent. But yeah, this is some awesome old school death metal that's more on the raw, gritty side, but definitely check it out. Coming in at number 19, in terms of traditional progressive metal, the best prog metal album of the year, Sermon with Of Golden Verse. While it is traditional prog, you still get some like alternative metal bits here and there. This is like almost like what would happen if early Tool and Catatonia met and had a child. That's what this album is to me. Like, it's more shorter formed prog metal, but they do it right. And it's only two guys, him and James Stewart, who's also the drummer in Decapitated. But yeah, these vocals, soothing, yet they can be intense at times. But this songwriting, like some really cool, clever songwriting on here. This band, I can't wait to hear what Sermon has in store next, because this album takes you on a journey through darkness in terms of prog metal. And it is my number 19. Number 18, we have Cruentum with Obsidian Refractions, the latest album in terms of release that's on the list. And yeah, it went up pretty high because, holy shit, like, for the first time in 8 years that this band has released anything, and they just deliver on everything that I love about old school metal, and perhaps then some. Like, apocalyptic tremolos, triplet chugs, occasional doom sections, little hints of thrash. Very much like what would happen if you mixed, like, everything about evil death metal, like Morbid Angel, Immolation, Incantation, and just... blows your mind. Absolutely blows your mind. And that's why it is my number 18. Number 17, we have Birdflesh with Sickness in the North. The silliest album on the list, and really the only grind album that I really got into this year. I could have had Rotten Sound on the list, as that was a really good one too, but I felt like Birdflesh was just head and shoulders better. And I think it's because while it is grindcore, I would say it's more thrash metal than grindcore, and even some crossover thrash, but short songs, delivering good catchiness, like even some funny fucking song titles like Welcome to the Jungle Rot and Lose the Arise, where they do homage to Obituary. But yeah, top to bottom, awesome, fun, thrashy, grindcore, crossover, whatever you want to call it. It's fun, and that's why it's my number 17. Number 16, we have Wretched Fate with Carnal Heresy. One of the best HM2 albums I heard this year. This was pretty high on the list at one point. Like, this was in my top 10, but then albums came out later and beat it out. But this is still fantastic. Like, Wretched Fate, almost continuing on the legacy of, like, early Bloodbath. Even though modern Bloodbaths kick ass, I mean, hell, Survival of the Sickest was my album of the year for 2022. But this still retains, like, this album by Wretched Fate kind of retains what Bloodbath was doing on, say, like, Nightmares Made Flesh and The Fathomless Mastery. And just pushing themselves, like, even throwing in a Death Doom track. Like, Upon the Weak was one of my favorite songs of the year because that felt like Bloodbath meeting Hooded Menace. But yeah, Wretched Fate, my number 16. Number 15, we get to another sad album, On Thorns I Lay, with their self-titled. I was a pretty big fan of their last one, Threnios, when it came out in 2020. So when I saw that they had a new one coming out, I was awaiting it, and holy shit, it's melodic, but still heavy Death Doom right here. Like, I would say as far as Death Doom goes, apart from maybe another album coming up in just a moment, maybe the best Death Doom album of the year, because I love that balance of somber melody and angry heaviness. This almost feels like a hybrid of early Paradise Lost, My Dying Bride, early Catatonia, and I'll even throw in a little bit of Asphyx, particularly the self-titled Asphyx album when they were at their doomiest. Like, mix all that together, maybe throw in a little Swallow the Sun, and you get On Thorns I Lay. And this album is a perfect example of Death Doom done very, very well. Number 14, we have Cloak with Black Flame Eternal. This one, I still can't believe how great this album is. It's gothic black metal, but there's little moments of death metal in here. And the vocals, like I said on my review for this album, the vocals sound straight up like Dave Davidson from Revocation, and he's doing, like, gothic black metal. This is some fantastic songwriting. Like, if you are a fan of Dissection, Necrophobic, I would say recent Tribulation, like, this feels like a slightly heavier and more blackened Tribulation. God damn it. But yeah, my number 14. Number 13, we have Autopsy with Ashes, Organs, Blood, and Crypts. I almost forgot to put this album on the list, but I went back and listened to it the day before I recorded this. I now agree this is a little bit better than Morbidity Triumphant, even though I absolutely loved that album. This album definitely a little more punky than Morbidity Triumphant, but you still get your doomy moments, and just, oh my god, that bass work on here by Greg Wilkinson, and the production. Probably in terms of like raw production, one of the best jobs of the year, I would say, bar none. But yeah, Autopsy, my number 13. Number 12, we get to my favorite straight up black metal album of the year, Shooter with Helvir. Yeah, this is some awesome stuff, and this was their first release in 8 years. And holy shit, Nag, Drauglin, and John Rice, that trio coming together and delivering some brutal black metal, but also bringing in melody. Like, this album, this is what I want to hear in my black metal. Not only just the blasts and the cold tremolos, but I want to hear riffs, I want to hear thrashy nods, I want to hear death metal nods, maybe some mid-tempo stuff. Shooter know how to do black metal right, at least in my opinion, and this album certainly proved that and then some. Especially songs like Pressed Hammerin', Gods of Black Blood, and even the title track, which was the big song on here. But yeah, Shooter. Hope we get something sooner after this, because I'm curious to hear what these three guys are going to have in store for us next time. But my number 12. Number 11, just missed the top 10. We have Carnation with Cursed Mortality. This is another one I checked out back in November, and holy shit, this is the best work that this band has done up to this point. And I've been a big fan of these guys ever since their debut. And this album definitely showcasing more mature songwriting, like especially the title track with those amazing clean vocals and exploring prog. Like, this is another example of like an old school sounding death metal band exploring more progressive terrain. This album still retaining brutal rawness with that HM2 tone, but exploring more with their sound to find their own identity. And holy shit, salute you guys. I can't wait to hear the next one. And I actually hope they continue to explore the more proggy death metal sound, but retaining that HM2 tone, because that's a pretty cool combination. My number 11. Alright, I need to get another drink in me, because now it is time for the top 10. These, in my opinion, were the 10 best albums to come out in 2023. And holy shit, all of them vastly different in some way, shape, or form in terms of not only genre, sound, but also their approach. Kicking things off with number 10, we have Tomb Mold with The Enduring Spirit, as my voice cracked there. I know this is probably going to be the most controversial pick on the whole list, because as I even said in a late recent CD collection update, which I recorded before this, but it's coming out tomorrow, I know this is a very divisive album. You have the group of people who absolutely love this album because they decide to experiment, and then you have the other group of people who aren't impressed with it because it's like, why did they change the formula? I'm on the side that absolutely loves this album for how experimental it got. Still raw and brutal. It's still Tomb Mold at its core, but definitely with the closing track exploring, again, kind of like the Carnation album, exploring more prog within their sound and just going for it. And when I say prog, I'm meaning in the sense of like cynic and atheist type of prog death metal, and that's kind of what they want to go for in mix with what they have been doing ever since the beginning. But yeah, Tomb Mold, my number 10. Number 9, Nablus Scarus with Exile. This was my first full Nablus Scarus album I've ever checked out. I always wanted to check this band out, but I just never got around to it until listening to this album, and holy shit. This is musical composition right here. Not just songwriting, this is straight up musical composition. Progressive death metal with lots of mellow death and maybe even little black metal parts kind of come in here. And I love the violin on here. It just adds to the atmosphere and the melodies. Bass work is flawless. The riffing is excellent. And the vocals, whether it be the screamed vocals, the death growls, or even Tim Charles doing the clean vocals that kind of sound like a mix of Daniel Tompkins, Geddy Lee, and James LaBrie. Just, wow. Masterful songwriting here. And the only reason it's at number 9 is because, well, there are 8 others I liked more. But yeah, Nablus Scarus, my number 9. Number 8, Sulphur Aeon with 7 Crowns and 7 Seals. This is one I still need to find the CD for it, and I'm probably going to try and order it after Christmas. But holy shit, first time checking out a full album. Like, I heard this band courtesy of Necrotic Nick, but this was the first full album I checked out, and holy shit, more proggy, blackened death metal. Like, very much a hybrid of, I would say, Behemoth, Morbid Angel, Immolation, maybe a little bit of Nile and, like, 1914, all mixed together. And just, holy shit, this is better than anything Behemoth has done after The Satanist. I am going to say that right now. So to you, Behemoth fans, sorry, but this blows I Loved You at Your Darkest and Opus Contra Natrum out of the water times 100. So, if you're a Behemoth fan that's been craving something better than the last 2 albums, definitely check this out, because there are some Behemoth nods on here. But still, fantastic album. Spooky, creepy, Cthulhu, Lovecraft, everything. Everything dark and evil. My number 8. Number 7, we have Dying Fetus with Make Them Beg for Death. Holy shit, one of the catchiest albums of the year, which has come to be expected when it comes to Dying Fetus, because they just know how to balance their brutal, technical death metal sound with adding catchy grooves, breakdowns, and hooks. Like, I mean, Dying Fetus can do no wrong, and this is an example of that. And even the production, it's a bit grittier, I would say, than some of the more recent output, but still audible. And the mix is great. Fucking holy shit. What more can I say about this album that I didn't say in my review? And it is my number 7. Number 6, we have Enforced with War Remains. Now we're starting to get into some more thrashy stuff on here, and this was close to being in the top 5, but man, just the competition this year. And this is easily the best album Enforced has done up to this point. Even more sinister and more brutal, I would say. Like, there's a lot less of the crossover influence that you got on the previous Enforced albums, and just more straight up thrash, and maybe even death thrash at times because of just how fast and brutal it gets. But man, Enforced, they just know how to express anger in a musical form and just absolutely go to town with it. And it is my number 6. Now we're into the top 5. Coming in at number 5, we have Enslaved with Heimdall. I mean, just masterwork once again from Enslaved, and I talked about it briefly on my ranking video for Enslaved, but I did review it. Holy shit, these songs just go through so many twists and turns, but delivering on those lavish prog atmospherics and melodies, but even getting back to the classic black metal at times that you remember Enslaved for, and even getting thrashy a couple of times here and there, but just the vocals, not only the clean, but the black metal vocals are just exceptional. Great riff writing, awesome swings. I mean, it's everything you want out of Enslaved, and maybe a little bit of extra seasoning to it, you could say. But yeah, Heimdall, Enslaved, number 5. Number 4, now we get into my personal favorite traditional thrash metal album of the year, and that is Mesro with Summon Thy Demons. This was another one of surprises, because this was a band I had not heard of until going to Metal Archives and seeing their page, and saw this was their first album in 33 years since their debut, Then Came to Killing. And I listened to this. It's classic thrash metal done perfectly in 2023. Like, this sounds like everything I love about that classic Bay Area thrash scene. Like, this is almost like the perfect hybrid of Metallica and Testament, with maybe little pepperings of Exodus here and there and Death Angel. But even the last track almost feels like German thrash because it's the fastest track on the album, but great catchy melodies, great hooks, but still heavy and fast. Amazing production, like it's just... love, love, love this album. Hopefully they have something new coming up down the pike, because I will definitely review it and will probably jack off to it as much as I want. Coming in at number 3, we get Suffocation with Hymns from the Apocrypha. I thought about putting this a little bit higher than 3, but man, the top 2, it was just so close. But this album, I would say the best Suffocation album since Pierced from Within. Even though the self-titled was great, Pinnacle of Bedlam was outstanding, this, I think, is better than those 2 albums. And the first one with Ricky from Disgorge on vocals, and he does an excellent job. Like, he sounds like old school Frank, like Human Waste, Effigy of the Forgotten, but still has his own sound to it. And just these songs, top to bottom, delivering great, brutal technicality, but bringing in melody, too. Like, this doesn't feel like sterile tech death like Of the Dark Light did. This sounds like proper Suffocation in 2023. And I love the production. I know some people think it's too clean. I still think it has a bit of a grit to it. But still, fucking love it. Welcome, Ricky Myers. You are definitely doing Frank justice. And Frank even still appears on this album on the re-recording of Ignorant Deprivation, I believe. That's the name of the song, I forget. But off of Breeding the Spawn. But yeah, killer album. Welcome back, Suffocation. My number 3. Number 2, we get Horrendous with Ontological Mysterium. Continuing on the trend of old school death metal as well as prog death, perfect mix of both on this album. Like, I was mind blown as to like how dynamic these songs get and just overall the construction. I was a big fan of their previous album Idol in 2018, which was in my year-end list for the Horseman podcast in 2018. But this album, just something about it, grittier but catchier. It's just wow. All I have to say about this album is wow. You gotta check it out for yourself to understand. My number 2. And now that just leaves us with only one number 1. Hope you've made it this far, because holy shit, this was an interesting year to say the very least. But for me, the best album of 2023. Some people might think I'm a bit biased because I'm friends with this guy, but listen to the damn album. Warlock's Grim and Withered Hags by Hellripper. Holy shit, like, James, if you're watching this, I gotta give you I gotta give you a round of applause, because this album, still black and speed thrash metal, classic heavy metal, whatever, but man, the best Hellripper album so far, and just the amazing songwriting on here. Like, you get everything from classic heavy metal to black metal, thrash metal, speed metal, but just top to bottom, all these songs fucking rip. And even that closing track, Mester Storeworm, Hellripper James, Exploring Prague, it's like that song feels like the best song that Opeth hasn't written in 15 years. Because you get so much Opeth on that track. And even old Catatonia towards the end with how somber it sounds. But just all these songs, like the Knuckle Lave, the title track, Hissing Marshes with that fucking Ace of Spades, Iron Fist type bass line. Oh my god. James, I fucking love this. It's my number 1. Yeah, some people are going to think I'm a bit biased, but again, listen to the album and you'll understand why I have it at my number 1. Don't be shocked to see this pretty high if by some miracle we get to the end of the decade on this channel. this would be pretty high up on my best of the 2020s. But yeah, Hellripper, my number 1. And that, ladies and gentlemen, does it for yet another year of heavy metal. Holy shit, I went through so many albums. I feel like I may have bitten off more than I could chew. But next year, I'm going to try and see if I can streamline everything, as, like I said, starting next year in 2024, we're going to get 3 full-length reviews. So we'll try to get a review for Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Tuesday will be under the radar. However, I'm only going to limit myself to 3 albums per episode. So I'm going to have to make some hard sacrifices for those episodes starting in 2024, but it's all going to be worth it to kind of maintain my sanity and creativity on here. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this long-ass video going through all of these albums. But now I want to know your lists. What are your favorite albums of 2023 for heavy metal? Let me know in the comments below. But we're not done with this year yet, because I still got a couple of collection updates to go through. I got the Edge of Sanity ranking coming up, as well as a couple of extra videos hidden in the back pocket, like a new thread video, as well as my New Year's Eve video where I talk about most anticipated albums for 2024. But until next time, you metalheads out there, keep your horns high, but most importantly of all, keep your dreams wet.